Good evening, all. Welcome to Liminal Muse, and thank you for joining me once again to read Pollyanna. If you'd like to support me and the channel, there's a link to buy me a coffee and check out my handcrafted items for sale or commission. You can also follow me on Blue Sky or on Discord. So let's take a moment, first of all, to settle into this place of stories and dreams. Take a breath and ground yourself so that your imagination can soar. John Pendleton, we learned last week, has once been in love. Upon hearing this from Pollyanna, Nancy immediately assumes the woman in question is Miss Polly Harrington. Over the course of their visits, Mr. Pendleton has opened up more to Pollyanna than he has to anyone in years. He says she reminds him of someone he misses very deeply. So when he asks Pollyanna to come live with him, at first she is delighted, believing that all three of them are sure to be a real family. But Nancy was mistaken. John Pendleton was once in love with Pollyanna's own mother, who had married someone else and has long since passed. Chapter 21. A Question Answered. The sky was darkening fast, with what appeared to be an approaching thunder shower, when Pollyanna hurried down the hill from John Pendleton's house. Halfway home, she met Nancy with an umbrella. By that time, however, the clouds had shifted their position, and the shower was not so imminent. "Guess he's going to round to the north," announced Nancy, eyeing the sky critically. "I thought 'twas all the time. But Miss Polly wanted me to come with us. She was worried about you." "Was she?" murmured Pollyanna abstractedly, eyeing the clouds in her turn. Nancy sniffed a little. "You don't seem to notice what I said," she observed aggrievedly. "I said your aunt was worried about you." "Oh," sighed Pollyanna, remembering suddenly the question she was so soon to ask her aunt. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare her." "Well, I'm glad," retorted Nancy unexpectedly. I am." Pollyanna stared. "Glad? That Polly was scared about me? Why, Nancy, that isn't the way to play the game, to be glad for things like that," she objected. "There wasn't no game in it," retorted Nancy. "Never thought of it. You don't seem to sense what it means to have Miss Polly worried about you, child." "Why, it means worried, and worried is horrid to feel," maintained Pollyanna. "What else can it mean?" Nancy tossed her head. "Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means she's at last getting down somewheres near human, like folks, and that she ain't just doing her duty by you all the time." "Why, Nancy," demurred the scandalized Pollyanna, "Aunt Polly always does her duty. She's a very dutiful woman." Unconsciously, Pollyanna repeated John Pendleton's words of half an hour before. Nancy chuckled. "Well, you're right, she is, and she always was, I guess, but she's something more now since you came." Pollyanna's face changed. Her brows drew into a troubled frown. "There. That's what I was going to ask you, Nancy," she sighed. "Do you think Aunt Polly likes to have me here? Would she mind if I wasn't here anymore?" Nancy threw a quick look into the little girl's absorbed face. She had expected to be asked this question long before, and she had dreaded it. She had wondered how she should answer it, how she could answer it honestly without cruelly hurting the questioner. But now, in the face of the new suspicions that had become convictions by the afternoon's umbrella sending, Nancy only welcomed the question with arms. She was sure that, with a clean conscience today, the love-hungry little girl's heart at rest. "Likes to have you here?" Would she miss you if you weren't here? If she wasn't here? Cried Nancy indignantly. As if that wasn't just what I was telling of you. Didn't she send me post-haste with an umbrella? 'Cause she seen a little cloud in the sky? Didn't she make me tote your things all downstairs so you could have the pretty room you wanted? Why, Miss Pollyanna, when you remembered how at first she hated to have... With a choking cough, Nancy pulled herself up just in time. And it ain't just things I can put my fingers on neither, rushed on Nancy breathlessly. It's little ways she has that shows how you've been softening her up and mellowing her down. The cat and the dog, and the way she speaks to me, and lots of things. Why, Miss Pollyanna, there ain't no telling how she'd miss you if you wasn't there, finished Nancy, speaking with an enthusiastic certainty that was meant to hide the perilous admission she had almost made before. Even then, she was not quite prepared for the sudden joy that illuminated Pollyanna's face. Oh, Nancy, I'm so glad. You don't know how glad I am that Aunt Polly wants me. As if I'd leave her now, thought Pollyanna as she climbed the stairs to her room a little later. I always knew I wanted to live with Aunt Polly, but I reckon maybe I didn't know quite how much I wanted Aunt Polly to want to live with me. The task of telling John Pendleton of her decision would not be an easy one, Pollyanna knew, and she dreaded it. She was very fond of John Pendleton, and she was very sorry for him because he seemed to be so sorry for himself. She was sorry, too, for the long, lonely life that had made him so unhappy. And she was grieved that it had been because of her mother that he had spent those dreary years. She pictured the great gray house as it would be after its master was well again, with its silent rooms, its littered floors, its disordered desk, and her heart ached for his loneliness. She wished that somewhere, someone might be found to, and it was at this point that she sprang to her feet with a little cry of joy at the thought that had come to her. As soon as she could, after that, she hurried up the hill to John Pendleton's house, and in due time she found herself in the great dim library, with John Pendleton himself sitting near her, his long, thin hands lying idle on the arms of his chair, and his faithful little dog at his feet. Well, Pollyanna, is it to be the glad game with me for the rest of my life? Asked the man gently. Oh, yes, cried Pollyanna. I've thought of the very gladdest of the kind of thing for you to do, and... With you? Asked John Pendleton, his mouth growing a little stern at the corners. No, but... Pollyanna, you aren't going to say no, interrupted a voice with deep emotion. What? I've got to, Mr. Pendleton. Truly I have. Aunt Polly... Did she refuse to let you come? Well, I didn't ask her, stammered the little girl miserably. Pollyanna turned away her eyes. She could not meet the hurt, grieved gaze of her friend. So you didn't even ask her? Well, I couldn't, sir. Truly, faltered Pollyanna. You see, I found out without asking. Aunt Polly wants me with her, and I want to stay, too, she confessed bravely. You don't know how good she's been to me, and I think, really, sometimes she's beginning to be glad about things. Well, lots of things. And you know she never used to be. You said it yourself. Oh, Mr. Pendleton, I couldn't leave Aunt Polly now. It's a long pause. Only the snapping of the wood and fire in the grate broke the silence. At last, however, the man spoke. No, Pollyanna. I see. You couldn't leave her now, he said. I won't ask you again. The last word was so low it was almost inaudible, but Pollyanna heard. Oh, but you don't know about the rest of it, she reminded him eagerly. There's the very gladdest thing you can do. Truly there is.
Not for me, Pollyanna. Yes, sir, for you. You said it. You said only a woman's hand and heart or a child's presence could make a home. And I can get it for you. A child's presence. Not me, but another one. As if uh, I would have any but you, resented an indignant voice. But you will, when you know. You're so kind and good. Why, think of the prisons and the gold pieces and all that money you saved for the heathen and Pollyanna, interrupted the man savagely. Once for all, let us end this nonsense. I've tried to tell you half a dozen times before. There is no money for the heathen. I never sent a penny to them in my life. There. He lifted his chin and braced himself to meet what he expected. The grieved disappointment of Pollyanna's eyes. To his amazement, however, there was neither grief nor disappointment in Pollyanna's eyes. There was only surprised joy. Oh! She cried, clapping her hands. Oh, I'm so glad. Well, that is it, she corrected, coloring distressfully. I don't mean that I'm not sorry for the heathen, only just now I can't help but being glad you don't want the little India boys because all the rest have wanted them, and I'm so glad that you rather have Jimmy Bean. Now I know you'll take him. Take who? Well, Jimmy Bean. Well, he's the child's presence, and he'll be so glad to be it. I had to tell him last week that even my lady's aunt and West wouldn't take him, and he was so disappointed. But now, when he hears of this, he'll be so glad. Well, I won't, ejaculated the man decisively. Pollyanna, this is sheer nonsense. You don't mean you won't take him? Well, I certainly do mean just that. But he'd be a lovely child's presence, faltered Pollyanna. She was almost crying now. And you couldn't be lonesome with Jimmy around. I don't doubt it, rejoined the man, but I think I prefer the lonesomeness. It was then that Pollyanna, for the first time in weeks, suddenly remembered something Nancy had once told her. She raised her chin aggrievedly. Maybe you think a nice, live little boy wouldn't be better than an old dead skeleton you keep somewhere. But I think it would. Skeleton? Yes. Nancy said you had one in your closet somewhere. What? Suddenly the man threw back his head and laughed. He laughed very heartily indeed, so heartily that Pollyanna began to cry from pure nervousness. When he saw that, John Pendleton sat erect very promptly. His face grew grave at once. Pollyanna, Pollyanna, I suspect you are right. More right than you know, he said gently. In fact, I know that a nice live little boy would be far better than my skeleton in the closet, only we aren't always willing to make the exchange. We are apt to still cling to our skeletons, Pollyanna. However, suppose you tell me a little more about this nice little boy. And Pollyanna told him. Perhaps the laugh cleared the air, or perhaps the pathos of Jimmy Bean's story, as told by Pollyanna's eager little lips, touched a heart already strangely softened. At all events, when Pollyanna went home that night, she carried with her an invitation for Jimmy Bean himself to call at the great house with Pollyanna the next Saturday afternoon. And I'm so glad. I'm sure you'll like him, sighed Pollyanna as she said goodbye. Well, I do so want Jimmy Bean to have a home. And folks that care, you know? This is smart way. Get down where I can see it.
Chapter 22. Sermons and Woodboxes. On the afternoon that Pollyanna told John Pendleton of Jimmy Bean, the Reverend Paul Ford climbed the hill and entered the Pendleton woods, hoping that the hushed beauty of God's out of doors would still the tumult that his children of men had wrought. The Reverend Paul Ford was sick at heart. Month by month, for a year past, conditions in the parish under him had been growing worse and worse, until it seemed that now, turn which way he would, he encountered only wrangling, backbiting, scandal, and jealousy. He had argued, pleaded, rebuked, and ignored by turns, and always, and through all it, he had prayed. Earnestly, hopefully. But today, miserably, he was forced to own that matters were no better, but rather worse. 2 of his deacons were at swords' points over a silly something that only endless brooding had made of any account. 3 of his most energetic women's workers had withdrawn from the Ladies' Aid Society because a tiny spark of gossip had been fanned by wagging tongues into a devouring flame of scandal. The choir had split over the amount of solo work given to a fancily preferred singer. Even the Christian Endeavor Society was in a ferment of unrest owing to open criticism of 2 of its officers. As to the Sunday school, it had been the resignation of its superintendent and 2 of its teachers that had been the last straw, and that had sent the harassed minister to the quiet woods for prayer and meditation. Under the green arch of the trees, the Reverend Paul Ford faced the thing squarely. To his mind, the crisis had come. Something must be done, and done at once. The entire work of the church was at a standstill. The Sunday services, the weekday prayer meeting, the missionary teas, even the suppers and socials were becoming less and less well attended. True, a few conscientious workers were still left, but they pulled at cross purposes usually, and always they showed themselves to be acutely aware of the critical eyes all about them, and of the tongues that had nothing to do but talk about what the eyes saw. And because of all this, the Reverend Paul Ford understood very well that he, God's minister, the church, the town, and even Christianity itself was suffering, and must suffer still more unless clearly something must be done, and done at once. But what? Slowly the minister took from his pocket the notes he had made for his next Sunday sermon. Frowningly he looked at them. His mouth settled into stern lines, as aloud, very impressively, he had read the verses on which he had determined to speak. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. It was a bitter denunciation. In the green aisles of the woods, the minister's deep voice rang out with scathing effect. Even the birds and squirrels seemed hushed into awed silence. It brought to the minister a vivid realization of how those words would sound the next Sunday, when he should utter them before his people in the sacred hush of the church. His people. Well, they were his people. Could he do it? Dare he do it? Dare he not do it? It was a fearful denunciation, and without the words that would follow, his own words. He had prayed and prayed. He had pleaded earnestly for help, for guidance. He longed, oh, how earnestly he longed to take now in this crisis the right step. But was this the right step? Slowly, the middle of the papers and thrust them back into his pocket.
Then, with a sigh that was almost a moan, he flung himself down at the foot of a tree and covered his face with his hands. It was there that Pollyanna, on her way home from the Pendleton house, found him. With a little cry, she ran forward. Oh, Mr. Ford! You haven't broken your leg or anything, have you?" she gasped. The minister dropped his hands and looked up quickly. He tried to smile. "No, dear. No, indeed. I'm just resting."
"Oh," sighed Pollyanna, falling back a little. "Well, that's all right then. You see, Mr. Pendleton had broken his leg when I found him. Well, he was lying down, though, and you were sitting up."
"Yes, I am sitting up, and I haven't broken anything that doctors can mend." The last words were very low, but Pollyanna heard them. A swift change crossed her face. Her eyes glowed with tender sympathy.
"I know what you mean. Something plagues you. Father used to feel like that lots of times. I reckon ministers do, most generally. You see, there's such a lot depends on 'em somehow."
The Reverend Paul Ford turned a little wonderingly. "Was your father a minister, Pollyanna?"
"Well, yes, sir. Didn't you know? I suppose everybody knew that. He married Aunt Polly's sister, and she was my mother."
"Oh, I understand. But you see, I haven't been here many years, so I don't know all the family histories."
"Well, yes, sir. I mean, no, sir,"
smiled Pollyanna. There was a long pause. The minister, still sitting at the foot of the tree, appeared to have forgotten Pollyanna's presence. He had pulled some papers from his pocket and unfolded them, but he was not looking at them. He was gazing, instead, at a leaf on the ground a little distance away. And it was not even a pretty leaf. It was brown and dead. Pollyanna, looking at him, felt vaguely sorry for him.
"It's a nice day,"
she began hopefully. For a moment, there was no answer. Then the minister looked up with a start. "What? Oh, yes, it is a very nice day."
"And 'tisn't cold at all either, even 'tis October,"
observed Pollyanna, still more hopefully.
"Mr. Pendleton had a fire, but he said he didn't need it. It was just to look at. I like to look at fires, don't you?"
There was no reply this time, though Pollyanna waited patiently before she tried again by a new route.
"Do you like being a minister?"
The Reverend Paul Ford looked up now very quickly. "Do I like what? What an odd question. Why do you ask that, my dear?"
"Well, nothing. Only the way you looked. It made me think of my father. He used to look like that, sometimes."
"Did he?" The minister's voice was polite, but his eyes had gone back to the dried leaf on the ground.
"Yes, and I used to ask him, just as I did you, if he was glad he was minister."
The man under the tree smiled a little sadly. "Well, what did he say?"
"Oh, he always said he was, of course, but most always he said, too, that he wouldn't stay a minister a minute if it wasn't for the rejoicing texts."
"The what?" The Reverend Paul Ford's eyes left the leaf and gazed wonderingly into Pollyanna's merry little face.
"Well, that's what Father used to call him."
She laughed.
"Of course, the Bible didn't name him that, but it's all those that begin, 'Be glad in the Lord,' or 'Rejoice greatly,' or 'Shout for joy,' and all that, you know. Such a lot of 'em. Once, when Father felt especially bad, he counted 'em. There were 800 of 'em.
800.
Well, yes. Well, I told you to rejoice and be glad, you know. That's why Father named him the rejoicing text."
Oh. There was an odd look on the minister's face. His eyes had fallen to the words on the top of the paper in his hand. "But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites." "And so your father liked these rejoicing texts," he murmured.
"Well, yes,"
nodded Pollyanna emphatically.
"Well, he said he felt better right away. That first day he thought to count 'em. He said if God took the trouble to tell us 800 times to be glad and rejoice, he must want us to do it some." And Father felt ashamed that he hadn't done it more. After that, they got to be such a comfort to him, you know, when things went wrong. When the ladies got into a fight. I mean, when they didn't agree about something, corrected Pollyanna hastily. Well, it was those texts too, Father said, that made him think of the game. He began with me on the crutches, but he said 'twas a rejoicing text that started him on it.
And what game might that be? Asked the minister.
Well, about finding something and everything to be glad about, you know? As I said, he began with me on the crutches. And once more Pollyanna told her story, this time to a man who listened with tender eyes and understanding ears.
A little later, Pollyanna and the minister descended the hill, and Pollyanna's face was radiant. Pollyanna loved to talk, and she had been talking now for some time. There seemed to be so many, many things about the game. Her father, and the old home life the minister wanted to know. At the foot of the hill, their ways parted, and Pollyanna down one road, and the minister down another, walked on alone. In the Reverend Paul Ford's study that evening, the minister sat thinking. Near him on the desk lay a few loose sheets of paper, his sermon notes. Under the suspended pencil in his fingers lay other sheets of paper, blank, his sermon to be. But the minister was not thinking either of what he had written or of what he intended to write. In his imagination, he was far away in a little western town with a missionary minister who was poor, sick, worried, and almost alone in the world, but who was poring over the Bible to find out how many times his Lord and Master had told him to rejoice and be glad. After a time, with a long sigh, the Reverend Paul Ford roused himself, came back from the far western town, and adjusted the sheets of paper under his hand. Matthew 23rd, 13 to 14, and 23, he wrote. Then, with a gesture of impatience, he dropped his pencil and pulled toward him a magazine left on the desk by his wife a few minutes before. Listlessly, his tired eyes turned from paragraph to paragraph until these words arrested them. A father, one day, said to his son Tom, who, he knew, had refused to fill his mother's woodbox that morning, "Tom, I'm sure you'll be glad to go and bring in some wood for your mother." And without a word, Tom went. Why? Just because his father showed so plainly that he expected him to do the right thing. Suppose he had said, "Tom, I overheard what you said to your mother this morning, and I am ashamed of you. Go at once and fill that woodbox." I'll warrant that woodbox would be empty yet, so far as Tom was concerned. On and on read the minister. A word here, a line there, a paragraph somewhere else. What men and women need is encouragement. Their natural resisting power should be strengthened, not weakened. Instead of always harping on a man's faults, tell him of his virtues. Try to pull him out of his rut of bad habits. Hold him up to his better self, his real self that can dare and do and win out. The influence of a beautiful, helpful, hopeful character is contagious and may revolutionize a whole town. People radiate what is in their minds and in their hearts. If a man feels kindly and obliging, his neighbors will feel that way too before long. But if he scolds and scowls and criticizes, his neighbor will return scowl for scowl and add interest. When you look for the bad, expecting it, you will get it. When you know you will find the good, you will get that. Tell your son Tom you know he'll be glad to fill that woodbox, and then watch him start alert and interested. The minister dropped the paper and lifted his chin. In a moment he was on his feet, tramping the narrow room back and forth, back and forth. Some time later, he drew a long breath and dropped himself into the chair at his desk. "God helping me, I'll do it," he cried softly. "I'll tell all my Toms I know they'll be glad to fill that woodbox. I'll give them work to do, and I'll make them so full of the very joy of doing it that they won't have time to look at their neighbors' woodboxes." And he picked up his sermon notes, tore straight through the sheets, and cast them from him so that on one side of his chair lay "But woe unto you," and the other, "Scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites." While across the smooth white paper before him his pencil fairly flew. after first drawing one black line through Matthew 23, 13, 14, and 23. Thus it happened that the Reverend Paul Ford's sermon the next Sunday was a veritable bugle call to the best that was in every man and woman and child that heard it. And its text was one of Pollyanna's shining 800. Be glad in the Lord, and rejoice, ye righteous, and shout for joy, all ye that are upright in heart. Chapter 23. An Accident. At Mrs. Snow's request, Pollyanna went one day to Dr. Chilton's office to get the name of a medicine which Mrs. Snow had forgotten. As it chanced, Pollyanna had never before seen the inside of Dr. Chilton's office. I've never been in your home before. This is your home, isn't it? She said, looking interestedly about her. The doctor smiled a little sadly. Yes, such as 'tis, he answered, as he wrote something on the pad of paper in his hand. But it's a pretty poor apology for a home, Pollyanna. They're just rooms, that's all. Not a home. Pollyanna nodded her head wisely. Her eye glowed with sympathetic understanding. I know. But it takes a woman's hand and heart or a child's presence to make a home, she said. Huh? The doctor wheeled about abruptly. Well, Mr. Pendleton told me, nodded Pollyanna again. Well, about the woman's hand and heart, or the child's presence, you know. Why don't you get a woman's hand and heart, Dr. Chilton? Or maybe you'll take Jimmy Bean, or if Mr. Pendleton doesn't want him. Dr. Chilton laughed a little constrainedly. So, Mr. Pendleton says it takes a woman's hand and heart to make a home, does he? He asked evasively. Well, yes. But he says his is just a house, too. Why don't you, Dr. Chilton? But why don't I... What? The doctor turned back to his desk. Get a woman's hand and heart. Oh, I forgot. Pollyanna's face showed a suddenly painful color. Well, I suppose I ought to tell you. It wasn't Aunt Polly that Mr. Pendleton loved long ago, and so we aren't going there to live. You see, I told you that it was, but I made a mistake. Well, I hope you didn't tell anyone, she finished anxiously. No, I didn't tell anyone, Pollyanna, replied the doctor a little queerly. Oh, that's all right then, sighed Pollyanna in relief. You see, you're the only one I told, and I thought Mr. Pendleton looked sort of funny when he said I told you. Did he? The doctor's lips twitched. Well, yes, and of course he wouldn't want many people to know it when it wasn't true, but why don't you get a woman's hand and heart, Dr. Chilton? There was a moment's silence. Then very gravely the doctor said, They're not always to be had for the asking, little girl. Pollyanna frowned thoughtfully. But I should think you could get 'em, she argued. The flattering emphasis was unmistakable. Thank you, laughed the doctor with uplifted eyebrows. Then gravely again, I'm afraid some of your older sisters would not be quite so confident. At least they haven't shown themselves to be so obliging, he observed. Pollyanna frowned again. Then her eyes widened in surprise. What? Oh, Dr. Chilton, you don't mean... You didn't try to get somebody's hand and heart once, like Mr. Pendleton, and couldn't, did you? The doctor got to his feet a little abruptly. Well, there, Pollyanna. Never mind that now. Don't let other people's troubles worry your little head. Suppose you run back down to Mrs. Snow. I've written down the name of the medicine and the directions how she is to take it. Was there anything else? Pollyanna shook her head. Well, no, sir. Thank you, sir, she murmured soberly as she turned toward the door. From the little hallway, she called back, her face suddenly alight.
Anyhow, I'm glad it wasn't my mother's hand heart you wanted and couldn't get, Dr. Chilton. Goodbye.
It was on the last day of October that the accident occurred. Pollyanna, hurrying home from school, crossed the road at an apparently safe distance in front of a swiftly approaching motor car. Just what happened, no one could seem to tell afterward. Neither was there anyone found who could tell why it happened or was to blame that it did happen. Pollyanna, however, at 5 o'clock, was borne limp and unconscious into the little room that was so dear to her. There, by a white-faced Aunt Polly and a weeping Nancy, she was undressed tenderly and put to bed. Well, from the village, hastily summoned by telephone, Dr. Warren was hurrying as fast as another motor car could bring him.
And you didn't need to more than look at her aunt's face.
Nancy was sobbing to old Tom in the garden after the doctor had arrived and was closeted in the hushed room.
You didn't need her more look at her aunt's face to see as she wasn't no duty out eating her. Your heads don't shake, and your eyes don't look as if she were trying to hold back the angel of death himself when you're just doing your duty, Mr. Tom. They don't. They don't.
Is she hurt bad? The old man's voice shook.
Well, ain't no telling,
Sobbed Nancy.
She lay back that white and still, and she might easily be dead. But Miss Polly says she wasn't dead. And Miss Polly had ought to know if anyone would. She kept up such a listening and feeling for her heartbeats and her breath.
Couldn't you tell anything when it's done to her? That old Tom's face worked convulsively. Nancy's lips relaxed a little.
Well, I wish you would call it something, Dr. Tom. Mr. Tom. And something good and strong, too. Drat it. Did I think of it running down our little girl? When I always say that the evil-smelling things anyhow, I did.
But where is she hurt?
I don't know,
Moaned Nancy.
There's a little cut in her blessed head, but 'tain't bad. Well, that it, Miss Polly says. She says she's afraid it's infernally she's hurt.
A faint flicker came into old Tom's eyes. I guess you mean internally, Nancy, he said dryly. She's hurt infernally, all right. Plague take that automobile. But I don't guess Miss Pollyanna be using that word all the same.
Huh? Well, I don't know,
Moaned Nancy with a shake of her head as she turned away.
Seems as if I just couldn't stand till the doctor gets out of there. I wish I had a washing to do. The biggest washing I ever see. I do.
She wailed, wringing her hands helplessly. Even after the doctor was gone, however, there seemed to be little that Nancy could tell Mr. Tom. There appeared to be no bones broken, and the cut was of slight consequence, but the doctor had looked very grave, had shaken his head slowly, and had said that time alone could tell. After he had gone, Miss Polly had shown a face even whiter and more drawn-looking than before. The patient had not fully recovered consciousness, but at present she seemed to be resting as comfortably as could be expected. A trained nurse had been sent for and would come that night. That was all. And Nancy turned sobbingly and went back to her kitchen. It was some time during the next forenoon that Pollyanna opened conscious eyes and realized where she was.
What? Aunt Polly? What's the matter? Isn't it daytime? Why don't I get up?
She cried.
Why, Aunt Polly? I can't get up.
She moaned, falling back on the pillow after an ineffectual attempt to lift herself. No, dear. I wouldn't try just yet, soothed her aunt quickly but very quietly.
But what is the matter? Why can't I get up?
Miss Polly's eyes asked an agonized question of the white-capped young woman standing in the window out of the range of Pollyanna's eyes. The young woman nodded. Tell her, the lips said. Miss Polly cleared her throat and tried to swallow the lump that would scarcely let her speak. You were hurt, dear, by the automobile last night. But never mind that now. Auntie wants you to rest and go to sleep again.
Hurt? Oh, yes, I ran.
Pollyanna's eyes were dazed. She lifted her hand to her forehead.
What? It's done up and hurts.
Yes, dear. But never mind. Just rest.
But Aunt Polly, I feel so funny and so bad. My legs feel so queer. Only they don't feel at all.
With an imploring look into the nurse's face, Miss Polly struggled to her feet and turned away. The nurse came forward quickly.
Suppose you let me talk to you now, she began cheerily. I'm sure I think it's high time you were getting acquainted, and I'm going to introduce myself. I am Miss Hunt, and I've come to help your aunt and take care of you. And the very first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to swallow these little white pills for me.
Pollyanna's eyes grew a bit wild.
But I don't want to be taken care of. Well, that is not for long. I want to get up. You know I go to school. Oh, can I go to school tomorrow?
From the window where Aunt Polly stood now, there came a half-stifled cry.
Well, tomorrow,
smiled the nurse brightly.
Well, I may not let you out quite so soon as that, Miss Pollyanna. But just swallow these little pills for me, please, and we'll see what they'll do.
All right, agreed Pollyanna somewhat doubtfully.
But I must go to school today after tomorrow. There are examinations then, you know.
She spoke again a minute later. She spoke of school and of the automobile and of how her head ached. But very soon her voice trailed into silence under the blessed influence of the little white pills she had swallowed. It's a rough place to end, but that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the story or anything, really. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, and check out the links below. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you in the next one.